right now in our government panel discussion on AI and public sector combining to create smart and high-performance governments. Well, we hope you all are having a great time at the World AI Show. Well, the artificial intelligence will likely have a substantial economic and social impact. The public sector is seeking and finding applications to improve services. Cognitive technologies also could eventually revolutionize every facet of the government operations. Well, this panel discussion will discuss how AI currently operates in the public sector and determine what skills and sources are needed to successfully apply it. We're looking at talking about robotics and cognitive automation, shifting human labor to high-value work. We're looking at talking about how AI can help governments and policymakers to make data-driven decisions to deal with the pandemic, the applications of AI for the citizen engagement, improving operational efficiency and AI strategies for policy and legislation, geopolitics of AI, what's the life cycle involved in developing and maintaining an AI system, using cognitive technologies to redesign public sector work, and will AI eliminate jobs leading to the advent of new ones? Well, ladies and gentlemen, for this wonderful panel discussion, we're joined by eminent panelists. First up, Richard Stirling, CEO, Oxford Insights, United Kingdom, joining us. Well, Richard has worked with the NHS, ODI, World Bank, UN, IDRC, and OECD on data and technology initiatives and has provided expert advice on data implementation to countries in Western, Central, and Eastern Europe, Israel, Middle East, China, Asia, Australia, New Zealand, Central, and Latin America. Thank you so much, Richard, for joining us and giving us your valuable time today.
Good morning. Delighted to be here. Perfect.
Thank you so much, Richard. Well, ladies and gentlemen, also joining is Laila Abdullah Hadhrami, the Digital Transformation and Change Management Expert, Director, Ministry of Technology and Communications, MTC, Smart City Platform, Oman. Laila specializes in digital and social media and currently heads the national projects in Oman, like the Government Innovation and Emerging Technologies and the Smart Ambassador Initiative in Oman and other projects related to the digital transformation. Thank you so much, Laila, for joining us today and giving us your valuable time today at the World AI Show.
Thanks, Savannah, and pleasure to join you all in this panel discussion.
Pleasure is all ours. Well, we also have Stirling, the AI expert, senior economist, Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, France, joining us. Well, being a senior economist in the Employment, Labor and Social Affairs Directorate of OECD, where he leads the organization's Future of Work initiative. Thank you so much, Stirling, for joining us today live at the World AI Show. With this, I request you to please unmute yourself and join us live on the screen. So we do have Stirling just joining us live on the World AI Show. Also joining is Mazen Fayed, the Government Industry Lead, Microsoft Middle East and Africa. Mazen is experienced in co-creation, innovation, and building new business models, leveraging mixed reality, IoT, blockchain, big data, advanced analytics, artificial intelligence, and machine learning and cloud computing. With this, I'd request Mazen to kindly join us on the screen. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. Thank you.
Pleasure. And ladies and gentlemen, introducing now the moderator of the panel discussion, Virginie Martins de Nobrega, the ethical AI and SDG expert, member of European AI Alliance, Belgium, Europe. Well, Virginie has over 15 years of expertise in strategic advising, performing in-depth global analysis, and conducting complex conflict resolutions in international and highly political contexts for multilateral organizations and private actors. Well, with this, I'd request Virginie to join us. Thank you so much, Virginie, for joining us live today at the World AI Show.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. I'm delighted to be here also.
Pleasure. So with this, let's begin our panel discussion. Virginie, over to you. Thank you for joining us once again.
Thank you. Thank you, colleagues and peers. Unfortunately, Alina Diti couldn't join us today to moderate this session, so we're going to have an informal talk about among us that we all prepared today. We have seen from the data intervention that the data journey for government is quite demanding, and it requires a lot of efforts and a lot of processes. And certainly today we're going to go throughout the journey of government and states to see how we can have more impactful and more smart governments and ministries. All of us know that the transformation of the public sector is not new. It started in the 80s with the result-based management, and then we had a wave of digitalization. But certainly COVID served as a catalyst to have more AI applications deployed within ministries and at state levels. And we have seen that we can not just do business as usual, but go faster, have more impact, and certainly also act on a regional level to share data and to share the right processes to try to be more active, more quick when we respond to pandemics. It already starting with new modeling when it comes to predictive analytics. We know that some startups are developing new ways to predict the next pandemics, to be better prepared, to be smarter, and really to work as a whole within the region throughout the states. And I would like you maybe to share with us a bit more of your expertise when it comes to the AI journey. Richard, I'm going to start with you because I know when we prepared that, we talked about the AI life cycle. And when it goes to public sector, there is another layer of complexity. As you know, I'm sure we all face that because governments are dealing with high complex challenges which are very intricate. And also you always have to make trade-offs between the data, the technology, the rights of the citizen and the consumers, and then the normal way of changes within an organization. So based on your experience also, because I know you have been very active on data in the MENA region, but also in Africa and the US, what have been maybe your insight from that journey and what are you bringing into the table when it comes to the AI life cycle?
Absolutely. So when you're thinking about the AI life cycle, then I like to think about that you've got two bits that you need to bring together. You need to bring together the technology, and we've had a couple of speakers already this morning talking about the technology bit, so I'm not going to focus on that. But you also need to focus on the problem and government's role in this and sort of bringing that through like proof of concept, startup, scale up into a sort of sector defining international business. And government's role in that journey is about conditioning the market and setting the rules for it. As you mentioned, like that means thinking about what is the ethical framework that needs to be applied. What things is it not okay for technology to do? What are the constraints that you want to put around combining different data sets along the way? All of those are sort of governance questions, and they're questions which are very live for every government, because every country's sort of feeling about what is and is not okay is different. Like it's a completely different set of rules that you should have, say, in China to the ones that you would have in Denmark, to the ones that you would have in Mexico. You know, every country needs to work out what is and is not acceptable for themselves, and then bring that to market and frame how that how the innovation comes through. Now, when you're talking about government innovation and government services, then there's an extra level of complexity because government needs to own that problem statement, and it needs to invest in its data infrastructure, understand how AI and these sort of cognitive technologies can actually help solve problems, and be quite cautious in some ways in terms of making sure that those decisions that are taken outperform the ones taken by humans. Now, this is not saying that humans never make mistakes. Like there's all sorts of studies that show that humans do, but the type of errors that people make and the type of errors that computers make are different, and you just need to be conscious about the two.
Yeah, thank you. So when you work with governments and you do work on the problem statement, do you accompany them on the ideation phase and throughout the pilot phase and then the scaling up, and especially when it comes to ethics? I know I like to work early on the ethical framework and try to see and push them out of their limits. How do you do, and what have been maybe the differences between regions that you have seen when it comes to really framing the ethical conversation?
So when we work with governments, then the first conversation tends to be around ethics and about setting the framework. So what is and is not okay. And I mean, I won't go into the specifics of clients, but I would say that you see a different starting point for, say, some of the European countries because of the impact of GDPR and data constraints. But the sort of points of commonality are around clear, defined success criteria for where you can start bringing AI services through into life. So using an example that isn't from a client, but and is quite well written up, there was an AI tool that was intended to give judges decision support in the United States. It looked like it was performing very well in testing. It was brought through into live. Actually, when it was through into live and it was seen from outside, outside modeling showed that it was only taking decisions on the basis of ethnicity. It wasn't taking decisions on any of the other characteristics of the case. You know, that type of thing, you really just need to make sure you iron out at the get-go. Once you've set that ethical framework and you've got those clear success criteria, it's, as a previous speaker was talking about, it's about creating the sort of the test bed or the scale-up environment where people can do a proof of concepts. They have access to the data they need. They get given clear permission statements. There is some freedom. There's a little bit of discretionary resource, so they can assemble the team around it. And then you start giving them a sort of golden path through into live. So you test at each stage. So it's not like you have a great idea and it will start affecting citizens' lives, but you have a path for bringing that innovation through. And you start managing it as a portfolio. Like, not everything needs to be a success. 10% as a success is great, but you fail people out and then you bring them back in. So you take more of a portfolio management approach to your innovation.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think we all know now that there is no inclusive AI except if it's by design, and it goes the same with discrimination, ethical concerns. And as you said, I think it's McKinsey research that 10 years ago said that 10% average success rate for public sector is an extremely high rate of success in comparison to the private sector. Mazen, I know also that you work on Microsoft and you had a lot of experience. So maybe from your point of view, when someone is starting the journey of AI and doesn't have this kind of experience in developing AI, what would be your advice? What would it take for them to start the journey?
Look, as mentioned even by previous speakers, building the right skilling across government employees and even with the citizens, and building the right awareness across the different use of AI scenarios and how this can benefit the community and the population is a key for the success of any solutions. And with this regards, you will see people with a great experience and like Laila in the change management and the adoption of those use cases across a wider community will drive a huge business impact. And the business impact can be measured and quantified through different type of pillars. One of them is to what extent we will be able to increase and maximize the population satisfaction and happiness. And the other one is through the time. So future is only belongs to the fast. And as much as we are able to build the right awareness internally and externally with the people who will benefit out of those AI scenarios, we will win the market. On the third level, on the optimization, how we can utilize and leverage the technologies and AI cognitive services, to be more specific, in optimizing our internal processes and cutting up red taps. So I spent 17 years of my life in the government before joining Microsoft, in the Egyptian government, by the way. So I've witnessed how much technology can help people to accelerate and advance their aspirations and make it real. The last pillar, which is a key on building the right learning and growth through leveraging the disruptive technologies, as well as the new scenarios through the different technology providers, not only restricted for Microsoft, and leverage the power of cloud capabilities as well. And we will see and hear a lot about AI on the edge, AI from a cloud, on-prem, and many other scenarios on capitalizing on the human resources knowledge and build the right scenarios that can benefit them.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's interesting that you say that certainly there is a huge impact for the beneficiaries, and we have seen, especially in emerging countries, that having predictive analytics, but also a real-in-time mapping of the impact of the COVID on the population, and especially the most vulnerable, was key to try to improve the policies. And I know that there are startups that are working really with governments to try to improve those predictive analytics to really put the right tools on the government so they are quicker in acting and really try to have more impact. And also something that you mentioned that is interesting is skill set. We have seen that the COVID crisis has really transformed the market and the job market. We are now all working remotely, or we are trying to continue that path. And I know, Steve, that you are looking at that from an economic point of view at the OCDE. So for you, what will be in terms of impact on the job market and economically of the deployment of new AI applications and tools?
Thank you, Virginie, and I apologize for my internet connection today. I've never had this problem in a year's time, so this is the first time. If you're having troubles with the audio, please let me know, and I'll try and switch off the video. But thanks very much for inviting me. So my job at the OECD is to advise OECD governments on the impact that AI will have on the labor market and what that means for policy, for labor market policy in particular, but also social protection and skills and training policy. And maybe let's start by taking a step back in what we've seen with technological change in the past. So when you have new technologies in the past, what it has shown is that it tends to automate certain tasks that people do, right? So a certain share of your job can be automated, and some people's jobs, more of it will be automated, others less. And in some cases, it actually leads to the destruction of some jobs. I mean, it's a kind of creative destruction process, because what we've always seen in the past, at least, is that yes, technology destroys some jobs, but it also creates many other ones and new ones. And in the end, it often tends to lead to better jobs in the long run. So overall, technology tends to be a rather positive thing for labor markets. But one thing that is a challenge, at least in the past, is that the people who are affected by technologies often tend to be the more vulnerable people. So you have the low-skilled people whose jobs have been more easily automated in the past. So robots can automate jobs that are, or tasks that are routine, that are easily programmable. Now, the clear difficulty lies here in transitions. At least that's what we've seen in the past. Now let's look at AI. I think AI brings new challenges. We're at the beginning of a journey. AI, many people have said this so far, the possibilities are expanding very rapidly. It's being adopted increasingly by employers as well. So increasingly we are seeing an impact on workers, but we're still at the early stages, especially when it comes to research. So we actually know very little at this point. But we have a few indications that suggest that AI and the impact on jobs may be different from previous technologies. And there are a number of reasons for that. The first one is that AI is a general purpose technology, and it's likely to affect workers in nearly all occupations and in nearly all sectors. But what's particularly interesting with AI, and that's something that we're already seeing in the data, is that the workers who are most likely to be exposed to AI tend to be high-skilled workers. So now we're not talking about workers on the factory floor. We are talking about doctors, we're talking about lawyers, we're talking about managers. So it's a different kind of person now being exposed to AI. That is not a bad thing for these people. AI, what we've seen so far at least, is that AI will complement them. Yes, it will automate some of their tasks that they do, but on the whole, it is likely to make them more productive. It is likely to increase their wages. So now suddenly you have a new challenge in the labor market, in that the people who are already high skilled, the people who are already earning high wages may earn even higher wages in the future. There might even be higher demand for these workers in the future, which will likely increase the gap between high skilled and low skilled workers in the labor market, leaving the low skilled workers even further behind. And in a world where already we are dealing with rising inequalities, which COVID-19 have only exacerbated, I think we likely face a challenge there. And this is where I think we need to be careful with what kind of social protection we put in place for people who are affected by this and who lose their jobs. What kind of skills programs, we've already talked about skills quite a bit, what training is necessary to make sure that everybody can benefit from these new technologies. And how do you accompany, basically through social dialogue also, the winners and losers, and make sure that everyone gains from these new technologies?
Yes, it's interesting to really see that we are all seeing that there are enforcement consequences to AI, and that we really have to be specific in our approaches. And as Richard said, that we need to be very clear on what are negotiable and non-negotiable when it comes to users and beneficiaries and end users. And Laila, I know that you also worked on that, and we previously talked about that and exchange. And I wanted to give you the floor a bit later, because I know you had a big impact in Oman with the smart cities, and infrastructure is certainly quite a big investment for any states, and especially in the MENA region right now. So when it comes again to AI, and building on what the other panelists said on building skills and really be careful about the ethical approach, what have been your lessons and what have been your journey with smart cities in Oman?
Thanks, Virginia, for raising this question. And it is one of my favorite, questions, because when it comes to this question, I always like to share one of my favorite stories. When we started the government innovation 3 years ago in Oman, we started talking about the AI and about the advanced technology and so on. So when it comes to the, the government sector, as Mazen said, the government sector, sometimes they are searching for facts, real scenarios and so on. And sometimes they resist, because they consider it is not a priority for them, and they will say, are we able to do that? Can we do it? The private sector can do it. The people outside Oman, they can do it, but we cannot do it. So we started shocking them, or let me say, inject them with some real facts, real scenarios. We decided to tell them we have some real scenarios, for example, with the private sector. So what we try to do is to do, integration. Everyone, when they say integration, it's about the data system. But what we did is integration of the experience and sharing knowledge. So if you integrate, and because we have a very successful stories when it comes to the private sector, they're always ahead. And I'm sure that, you can find this everywhere around the world. The private sector is always ahead the government sector. So try to do that integration. So the government sector, they can learn about the real stories. It's not just about scenarios. It's about real experience from the private sector. The good news that we have launched recently, the National Center for AI and Advanced Technologies in my organization, Ministry of Transportation, Communication and IT. So now we have a dedicated center just for the AI, so we can support all the government sector, not just the government sector. As we say, we are going to work in a national level, so we can also support the private sector, the SMEs, the academia, and also the community individuals who are the ones who are going to use these services. So this is our new journey that we have started, because as I said, we need first to shock the community, the government, that we need to use the AI and the other advanced technologies. And now with the dedicated center, we are trying to create a lot of scenarios. We are trying to have different integrated meetings with the different stakeholders, so we can succeed. Because we are not going also to succeed in the smart cities if we haven't worked, in the infrastructure. Because when it comes to the smart cities, you need also the technology infrastructure, and that has to be done with all the sectors that I have mentioned, in our project. So this is what we are trying recently to do in AI and smart cities.
It's interesting, and as you say, Laila, I think there is a challenge there for the public sector, because you need smart partnership with the private sector, but you also need to be very aware of the strategic choices, because you don't want to be dependent. Especially when it comes to sensitive data. We had seen Richard in the UK with an NHS back in 2017. The problem of then one of the deep learning company having quite like the monopole on the health data of the UK citizens. And I know in France we're having the same thing, where Microsoft is going to manage data from the health sector. And then it's a question also, how far do you extend this partnership, and how much control do you have to go as a state? And also, as you mentioned, there is a journey, I would say, in transformation and in change management. And Mazen, I know you work also with Laila on cognitive new technologies, but also you accompany sometimes small SMEs, and we see that there is a huge gap between the GAFAM like Microsoft, but also startups who are very high on tech, and other small SMEs, for example, in transport, in consumer services, who sometimes don't really know how to to start the journey because the gaps of the knowledge is too big. So how do you deal with that with your experience? And also, again, Laila and Mazen, coming from the background, how do you implement such cognitive new technologies to enhance the participation of citizens, to be sure that we are inclusive and that they participate, which is something that we see the new generation is really willing to do in the new form of governments that are happening everywhere in the world?
Okay, that's a big question. So let's take the first part with regards to redesigning the public sector. Good understanding of the customer that we are dealing with, and public sector in terms, it's an industry of industries. So government services is not only limited to the federal type of government services, but it can cover everything. You will see consumers, retail, banking, everything within the government and public sector. This is first part. So in order to deal with it, we need to understand those type of industries pretty well to map it with the right use cases. So the government official has to look at public sector services as who is the consumer. The citizen is the consumer. So if government thinks of those people and citizens as a customers, then understanding their behavior, preferences, and their segments contribute towards the development of systems that increase their satisfaction, right? So if we looked at how we can implement different use cases of our cognitive services and analysis across the different type of populations and segments, so such as building a recommendation system, predictions, and building a public outreach messages, especially in time durations like what we have all faced during the pandemic. And those use cases has been represented on the real life across intelligent document processing, call center voice transcription for emotional intelligence, where citizens, where they connect with call centers, the call center leveraging the AI scenarios can understand the behavior of the citizens or the person in connections. Although we have seen a lot of development and advancements in the intelligent bots and bot services across the citizen services. So in general, decision makers within the governments can study the impact of their decision or policies if a reliable practice of data collections and generation of those data are put in the right place. So data is the source of any reliable AI scenarios. So let's say a decision maker within a government needs to understand the impact of a certain policy on the financial activity, such as health or a smart city or anything. So when Laila, for example, wants to drive a specific AI initiative for a smart city by itself, it has multiple different modules and tracks. She has health, she has transportation, she has physical interactions that it's moved to digital interactions and many others. So then they need to have a way to record and retrieve the financial activities even before the implementation of such a decision or a policy. And the reliable sources of those data can be represented through different means. One of them is the number of point of sales and the number of transactions that it's happening within the city itself. How many people are eating in a restaurant, a number of taxis that has been called, or even number of people are visiting a specific malls or a tourist spots under high demand for a specific people. Those type of data can help the government official in setting the right foundation for the AI models through three different layers. One of them is the policy making through the simulation. It's what ifs analysis and the implementation of social distance versus total lockdown, how this will reflect on the economy. Another one through the policy effectiveness of monitoring what's happening. So after agreeing on a specific release of a policy, you need to monitor the impact of this policy during the implementation itself through leveraging mathematical and machine learning modules to evaluate the policy direct and indirect impact of this social distance. Why we should say 2 meters or 1.5 meters, or should it be 5 meters or not? And the last point on the policy impact analysis from a simulation and tracking at the same time. And this will help them in the near future and for the far future even to recover and even to reimagine how they will react for any future activities, leveraging a pure cognitive services and AI. So I'm give it to Laila, where she will tell us more about how the citizen engagements can be improved, operation efficiency and strategies for policy making through the community and public services. So I'm handed over to Laila. Laila, can you share with us your experience in that area?
Thanks, Mazen, for kicking the ball on my yard. So when it comes to that, one of the main challenges, let me say it frankly with all of you. So when it comes to, as Mazen said, when it comes to the government sector, it is affecting all the industries in the country. It is affecting the financial sector, the banking sector, the logistics sector. So it's very important that each country, they have to decide first what is their priority, and this can be based on the citizen engagement. What the citizens they are looking for? What are the services that going to empower the digital economy? Because whenever we speak about digital transformation, now we are speaking about the digital economy, because each country now they are trying to improve their digital economy through investing in the digital transformation and smart cities. So because of the citizen engagement, they will know what is their priorities, where they can invest money so they can get more income to their. So it's very important to start working as sectors, because when it comes to the data integration, you will find out it's not based on organization, it is based on sectors. If you want to, for example, work in the telecommunications sector, people are always, when it comes to the weakness of technology, weakness of the telecommunication or so and so on, they will start criticizing that, for example, the telecommunication companies. They said, oh, we have the worst telecommunication company. But the real scenario, why it is weak, go back to the real scenario. There's government scenario behind these companies, because government are the one that's giving the license, giving the approvals, for example, to build tower for improving the strength of the telecommunication in that area and so on. So if we are succeeding, for example, to invest on the telecommunication sector, we are going to get more income, and we are going also to make citizens more happy, because they will say, okay, now we are satisfied about our services. So this is what I could say about it. We should always engage the citizens because they know what they want. We should not just build project or services because we feel, okay, we feel this service is going to be trending or it's going to be amazing, but have to do it based on the request or the need of the citizens, and also based on the request of the country. What is the country really wants to do, how they are going to improve their economy and so on. And with that priority, we can succeed with the data and using most of the advanced technologies. And then we can also do the real integration between all the smart ecosystem in our country, not just with the government sector, but all the ones who are affected with that sector, whether they are private sector, academia, SMEs, and the community. And that's what I could say, about it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Laila. As you said, I think it's important to have needs assessment of the population, because you can, especially at the policy level, you can have high ambitions sometimes, but you really need to check. I know there is an initiative in Milan a few years back where the local government was very sure of what to do in terms of priorities. And when they did the needs assessment to the population, their priorities were completely reversed to what the population wanted. And it was quite surprising to them to say, oh, they don't want us to invest in infrastructure, they would rather us invest in education. So they completely changed their policy and the local policies and investing in the right areas where there was a need from the citizen. And as you said, there is for you a sectoral approach, and then there is an integration at state level and try to combine and have smart interconnectivity between sectors. And Richard, maybe that's where, and other ones, well, you can step in there. So contextualization is key. And yet, when you are a state, you're still going to act at the global level internationally. And there is a geopolitics of AI. And I think we all agree since 2019 and maybe before of the risk and opportunities when it comes to AI and geopolitics of it. But what would be your intakes on that, working for international organizations and other actors?
So you're absolutely right that this is a journey that almost every country is going on at the moment, and the interplay between different countries and the geopolitics of this is absolutely fascinating. One of the things that we do at Oxford Insights is we help countries understand where they stand. So we do a lot on benchmarking, and also help them understand where to position themselves internationally. I think that what you're seeing a bit of a schism, particularly around that sort of ethics lens that we were talking about earlier, of how different countries are approaching it. So if you look at, say, some of the AI solutions that are coming out of China or Russia, they're coming at it from a completely different standpoint to some of the AI solutions that are coming out of, say, Europe. About how they respect people's rights, whether it is acceptable to do facial profiling, the degree of robustness that you're seeing coming through. So there are some solutions on the market that I've seen where like it's just based on bad science. Like the marketing sounds great, but the science underneath it is terrible. If I had a sort of a plea for the international audience in this, it's to, like the role of national government is to sort of set the rules of the road and condition the market. I feel like at a geopolitical level, there is a duty on the international community to set the rules of the road for what is globally acceptable, in a very similar way to the way in which governments are today setting the rules of the road as to what is acceptable in terms of international taxation. You know, we need to come together, work out what is and is not okay, and then establish the rules and let the private sector then bring forward the innovation that plays within those rules.
Yeah, I agree with you, and maybe all of you can jump in, especially Laila and Maïzen, giving us your perspective from the MENA region. We have seen that, as you said, there is different ethical frameworks, and the EU have been very strong because they were also lagging behind the technology, and so they were trying to come up with that. I don't know if you all, I'm sure you all looked at it, the recent UNESCO conversation where most of the countries were quite aligned when it comes to the basic ethical guidelines, when it comes to AI, when it comes to having a peaceful development of AI applications, be very mindful that we need to protect beneficiaries. And I know the UN and the OECD most recently have really had this approach to be purpose-driven, mandate-driven. Is it something also, things that you strongly believe in, that you see also when you work in economy, but also Laila and Maïzen, from your perspective in your country, in Oman, in Egypt, this purpose-driven, mandate-driven approach when it comes to be sure that we're not increasing inequalities, we are not reinforcing biases, that we are not imposing a Western world vision of AI and what the world should be? Is it something that you are feeling, that you are very conscious about when you develop your AI solutions? Because I know we are, but sometimes it's also good to know what are your practices and how do you fight on such. So you can just jump in and share with us. Yes, Tins, please go ahead.
So
thanks.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Thank you. So let me start with that. Since I've been engaged, I'm covering almost 80 countries within the Middle East and Africa region, where I've been engaged across many different AI initiatives. So these days, we see a lot of focus on AI practitioners in two different areas. The first is the ethical AI concept, which is ensuring that machine learning is not being used to unfairly favor certain parts of a population on the other. And from Microsoft perspective, we have a very clear governance and policy to govern this type of implementations to make sure it has been provided fairly across the population of any country or a region. The second pillar is through the responsible AI, which is ensuring that the data set used to build the artificial intelligence systems and engines, modules, is balanced enough and inclusive, and it's not being biased to a certain type of community on another across different variation. It's about age, it's about gender, or any other stuff. So with this regards, where we have a proper representation of people who are giving us the right guidance where this is a specific group within Microsoft, we call them under CELA and acts and anti-corruption and all that stuff, of people who has been all the right experience to support the government employees on the right implementation of the scenarios for making sure that there is no misuse in the future across the AI scenarios. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Tins, you wanted to jump in and share with us.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I think that for AI to be successful, people need to trust AI. And this is one of the reasons that the OECD last year published the OECD AI principles. So all OECD countries have signed up to these principles, and all the G20 countries have now also signed up to these principles. It's not regulation. People sign up to this voluntarily. But the idea is to lay down some basic principles that everyone can follow when they develop AI, when they implement AI. And I think that is crucial to create trust in the systems that are being developed. Now, of course, there will be cultural difference, etc. But I still think that there are some basics that need to be agreed across country, especially if we're going to start selling and purchasing these technologies across countries. The other interesting thing, I think, is the recent developments in the European Union around AI and the regulations around AI. And it's very different from what we see in other countries. In the EU, we tend to see a kind of anticipating kind of role of regulation. We see potential difficulties, challenges, and we want to avoid problems for people being negatively affected by these technologies. So, for instance, many applications in the employment sphere are actually identified as high risk because they have a potentially big and maybe negative impact on some workers. Whereas in other countries like the US, we see a more let's wait and see approach. And then if something bad happens, let's react to this. Now, of course, there's a careful balance here to be attained between innovation on the one side and regulation on the other. And the trick is to get that balance right. But it's very healthy that countries are thinking about this, but also at an international stage to make sure that at least we have some basic rules that we all agree on.
Yeah, I agree, Stins. I think, as you said, we are basic general concepts and principles that we all share, and then we have to contextualize them. And then we started with UNESCO principle, and possibly afterwards we're going to have the conventions. And the approach is very different. There are some who are business oriented, more others who are more social oriented, like in the EU and in the MEDA region. I think you are very high tech and edge cutting technologies oriented, and still trying to really represent the MEDA region. So, Laila, based on that, and before we lead that conversation, as we know and we mentioned before, there is no AI which is inclusive. It's not by design, with gender balance by design, who is not diverse by design. So it starts with the right teams, the right skill set, having diverse team, and really be open in different ways of doing, and really looking at the background of people who work on that, not just data engineers, but also policymakers, and really having that diversity. I know you're passionate about that also, Laila. So possibly also from the government, Oman government, would you like to have the last word on that topic before we wrap up the conversation today?
Well, Virginia, thanks a lot. And I always say, technology is there. Technology is everywhere. We can do it anytime, but we need to have, the sustainable development in the, the human resources, because as I said, people sometimes feel afraid of, the new changes. So we have to give a full support, and we have to encourage, the government sector to have sustainable innovation in their services, because sometimes as soon as they automate their service, they say, okay, we are done, we are digitalized. But no, because the technologies are changing everywhere. Because even when it comes to the artificial intelligence and the machine learning, we have new languages, new scenarios. So they have to keep, the organization and change to be sustainable in this government. And we have to follow up and give them support, especially, the organizations that, giving the consultancy and the supervising the digital projects in each country. So this is what I could say: keep sustainable development in most of your service, never stop improving your services.
I like that last word. So I'm also a big fan of SDGs and everything related to social impact. So I'm sure it's shared by all of you, but if you all want to close that with maybe saying to us, if you trust AI, and what in one keyword, what would be the future for you? Optimistic, negative, full of potentialities? I don't know. Richard, do we want to start? before we wrap up?
I absolutely trust responsible AI to transform public services for the better.
Thank you. Mazen?
Look, I see the future in AI. This is the new wave of the transformation, and transformation change is inevitable. So there is always an opportunity where AI can provide to the community and opening new jobs even that we have not been aware of.
Steens?
To me, it's really about the complementarities between human intelligence and artificial intelligence, and making sure that we maximize these benefits, grab the opportunities, but also be mindful that some people might lose out, and be careful to ensure that we protect these workers and individuals.
Yeah. Thank you. I think it's time to wrap up. It was nice to have this conversation with my colleagues, and hopefully we can have that every single day, but we can't. So we're all aligned that SDGs are very important and that AI is key for the public sector, and hopefully we will raise to the occasion of really transforming deeply the public sector for the better. Thank you for being with us and for being here with me this morning, and I am looking forward to see you later and talk with you later.
Thanks, Virginia.
Thank you.
Thanks to all.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you once again, and panelists, for joining us in the World AI Show. We truly value all your incredible insights. Thank you once again.
Thanks, bye now.
God bless.